concerns, healthcare concerns in this country as part of our advocacy as United Methodist Church. And so she'll be greeting us right now and saying a few words, a few updates, and maybe some ideas of how you also can be a part of this. So welcome, Susan Burton from General Board of Church and Society. Let's greet her.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Folks in the back? No? All right, better? Yes? All right, so I'll talk a little bit closer. Is that better? So I just want to thank you all and Bishop for the warm welcome. I have the privilege of working with Bishop Johnson in her leadership of our board as a member of our board of directors, and so I'm always grateful for an opportunity to be with her and the people whom she serves. And so it is wonderful to be here today with your annual conference. I also want to thank the Church and Society team for the invitation to be here. As you know, there are lots of conversations about healthcare happening in our nation, aren't there? So I had the opportunity recently to be in Erie with a group of people from across the community that are connected with United Methodist Ministries and churches. I also had an opportunity to be, Erie, Connellsville, and Harrisburg, to have some conversations about our values as people of faith. Not particular legislation, because I think the legislation is keeping us from really remembering God's vision for our people. And so I want to talk just a second about those values. How many folks are familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan? Yeah, right? One of the things that sometimes we don't connect is that the Good Samaritan bound up the wounds and paid for a stranger's health care. So when we as the United Methodist Church say that we believe that health care is a basic human right and that we believe in quality, affordable health care for all, access to a quality, affordable health care for all, that's why we do it. Because we were commanded by Jesus to go and do likewise. How many of you in your communities, think about the communities where you live and serve, how many of the jobs, the employers provide medical benefits? Just think about that for a second. The Kaiser Family Foundation, which is a nonpartisan organization, found that 71% of Pennsylvanians, children and adults enrolled in Medicaid, are living in the household with a worker. So when we talk about Medicaid, we're not talking about lazy people, even though that's how it's talked about a lot of times. I'm guessing that many of you in this room have a story of someone who's been impacted, has benefited from, has been held up by this covenant we made as a nation, that no person, whether suffering from addiction, no person who's lost their job, no person with a disability, no person who's elderly and in a nursing care facility would have to go without the care they need to thrive and to live as God intended. So one of the things that we have been asking as United Methodist in all of these places, I'm actually going to step back and tell you one story I hadn't planned on telling. I was with a woman in Connellsville, Pennsylvania, and she is a community librarian there. She began telling me that when I asked her the question, and I invite you to ask this question of your friends and neighbors and people in church with you as well. I said, so how has health care made a difference in your family? Medical care, having access. And she said, well, I was a part-time teacher and I didn't have health benefits. My son was born with a disability in that he could not swallow his food. And he needed surgery. He was on a really expensive formula, and he needed surgery to be able to swallow so that he could live into adulthood. She said, I'm proud to say that he's now 15 years old because the people in my community helped me put tires on my car and helped me put in gas in my gas tank to get him to the hospital in Cincinnati because Philly and Pittsburgh could not help him. She then told me that her son had medical assistance from Pennsylvania with funds from the state and funds from the federal government. And she said to me, every child should have medical care. No mother should have to worry about whether or not their son can have life-saving health care. And so for the first time, earlier this week, she went and met with Senator Toomey's office as a person of faith to say, no matter what you do, we know that current health care law, the Affordable Care Act, is broken and has problems. But whatever you do, make sure you're increasing access to health care and not cutting people off. What we are asking, so there are lots of proposals being made. Medicaid serves as a shock absorber. So I'm guessing, well, let me just ask, how many of you know someone who's been impacted by the opioid epidemic in Pennsylvania? How many of you know someone who's lost a job or is working a job where they don't have medical benefits? How many of you know a small child who lives in a family that doesn't earn enough money to pay for medical care by themselves? How many of you know someone with a disability who is dependent upon medical care to be able to live and thrive the way God intended? How many of you know a senior citizen who has Medicare but does not get enough money from Medicare to provide the care they need in an assisted living facility and has to tap into Medicaid? Absolutely. My hope is that what you will do, each one of you, is to call your senators, Senator Casey and Senator Toomey, or write them a letter or a postcard, and to say, as a person of faith, as a person called to care for the least of these, that you will call your senators, write your senators their postcards over at the booth, the MFSA booth, and the Urban Commission booth, but you will write them, call them, and say, as a person of faith, do not make cuts to Medicaid funding nor change the structure, because when there is an unexpected emergency, my neighbor, even the people I don't know in my community, need to have access to that care so they can get back up on their feet until the time when they have care provided by their employer or family. I grew up in South Georgia and North Carolina with grandparents who told me that as I read scripture, the stewardship was a big thing. So I appreciated that part of yours as well, that before you buy anything, you're going to tithe. The stewardship matters. For us as people of faith, we need to make sure we're asking our country to be good stewards of our money, that it go to benefit all our people. I want to thank you for your time. I'm going back to Washington, D.C. because my daughter graduates from elementary school. But I hope that you will reach out to me and find me if you have any questions, because we want to support you in using your voice as people of faith at a time when it's needed. Thank you so much.
Every one of us could write a postcard. Just think if they suddenly got 400 postcards or 800, what would that look like? At this time, we'll call up our lay leaders to have a report about what's happening in the world of laity in Eastern Pennsylvania Conference.
We're ahead of schedule. You realize that? Yeah, amen. I've been coming to annual conference for a lot of years, and this is the first time I can remember that we were ever ahead of schedule. So Bishop, honored guests, members of annual conference, it's still a great time to be a United Methodist in the Eastern Pennsylvania Conference. Much has transpired since I spoke to you last, and much has changed is yet to come. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. First, I want to bring you greetings from the Board of Lay Ministry. And let me summarize some of the board's sponsored events that have occurred since our last meeting. The Laity Academy was conducted in August, the first weekend in August, at the Inn at Reading. 10 courses were offered and attended by 180 persons. Despite the unplanned fire alarms, you know what I mean if you were there, the Academy was deemed a success by those in attendance. This year's Laity Academy will be held at Cedarville UMC on August 3rd and 6th. This change in venue was prompted, at least in part, by an effort to control costs. And I think the fire alarms had a little bit to do with it too. Again, 10 courses will be offered. Dean of the Academy, Aubrey Bates, and his team have put together another strong program. Registration is now available on the conference website. The Laity Retreat was reinstituted last year. Chaired by our Associate Conference Lay Leader, Suzette James, it was held at Jarretttown UMC on the second Saturday in September. 39 participants experienced spiritual renewal while being addressed by a district superintendent, a church pastor, and a certified lay minister, each giving their own perspective on lay servancy. This year, the retreat will be held at Grove UMC in Westchester on the second Saturday in September. That's the 9th. Plans are still being finalized, but expect speakers again to be a district superintendent, an ordained clergy person, and a lay person. Look for registration information shortly on the conference website. Tools for Ministry was conducted on a common date, April 29th, in all 6 districts. Plenary speakers with engaging messages and short courses with practical application were offered. Attendance varied by location, but in total, over 500 people attended. The next Tools for Ministry will be held on March 10th, 2018, in each of the 4 new districts. Lay leadership teams are already making plans. Now let me lift up some of the ministries of laity around the conference. And there are so many, I apologize to those I don't mention. 8 new certified lay ministers were certified, bringing the total CLMs in the conference to 51, 15 of whom are assigned to a parish or some other specific role. Certified lay minister is the highest certification a layperson can attain in the United Methodist Church. These folks have gone through an intensive year-long program of study and made a significant commitment to serve the Lord. Anchorage Breakfast Ministries in Lancaster City is operated by 9 United Methodist and 5 other churches in the area. They serve a hot breakfast to about 135 folks 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Each morning, 12 to 15 dedicated volunteers, and not always the same volunteers, assemble at First Church in Lancaster, cook, set up, and serve. In their first 6 months, 1,800 people were served. Their first anniversary will be August 1st of this year. The bishop, I along with the bishop and the cabinet had an opportunity to participate last December and help serve one morning. The Pike Connection consists of 5 United Methodists and 3 other community churches in the Lidditz area. And they operate one of the Life Tree Cafes you heard mentioned earlier. It's in its 2nd year and still growing. Support Connections of Lebanon County is a relationship-based anti-poverty initiative with 30 volunteers from 14 churches, 7 of which are United Methodist churches in the current Northwest District. They meet weekly for a fellowship meal, childcare, and programs for helping low-income families move towards self-sufficiency. The United Methodist Women of Newtown UMC provides support to A Woman's Place, the Bucks County Family Services Group, and Liberté. These organizations assist victims of domestic violence, the homeless, those suffering from addiction, those with HIV/AIDS, and many others in the Bucks and Montgomery County areas. And these are just the tip of the iceberg, folks. There are many more, but truly, we are the hands and feet of God in the Eastern Pennsylvania Conference. Now, when last we were together in this forum, I spoke of change. Remember? I don't see any heads nodding. Remember, we talked a lot about change, okay? Well, since then, we've had a general conference, and now a special session of general conference has been called to hear and act on the report from the Commission on the Way Forward in February of 2019. We talked about that a little earlier today. What will come of that, no one knows. But what I do know is that whatever happens, each of us needs to keep focused on the main thing. That is, making disciples for Jesus Christ, for the transformation of the world. We also voted to restructure this conference. We voted to close each of the 6 districts and to create 4 new districts. Much work has gone into this to effect this change, and I applaud and thank those that did that work behind the scenes. We've each got a new district to get to know. I challenge each of us to get to know what churches are in your district and cooperate with them fully. Lastly, you've heard talk of St. James UMC and how it's revitalizing. I had the privilege of attending their bicentennial celebration this past year. There were other bicentennials in the conference, and a centennial celebration, and a sesquicentennial celebration. Some of those congregations were in decline, and others were being revitalized. While it was right and fun to recognize and honor the past, each celebration looked forward and focused on the main thing. Again, making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. You've heard me say that before. We need to keep the main thing the main thing. Whether we're attending a class to gain skills, feeding the hungry, serving the needy, celebrating the longevity of a congregation, or deciding the fate of the United Methodist Church, we need to keep the main thing the main thing. May God bless and keep you all. Okay. And now the United Methodist women have a brief presentation. Gladys Hubbard and Susan Zook, co-presidents of the United Methodist Women.
Thank you. Bishop Johnson, members of the annual conference. My name is Gladys Hubbard, and
my name is Susan Zook.
Will all of the members of the United Methodist Women please rise in body or spirit?
Make sure the pastors know they have to rise.
And you know all pastors are members of United Methodist Women.
There you go.
Unisons, please.
If you know
The organized unit of United Methodist Women shall be a community of women whose purpose is to know God and experience freedom as whole persons through Jesus Christ, to develop a creative, supportive fellowship, and to expand concepts of mission through participation in the global ministries of the church. Thank you.
You can sit down. Good. 2019 will be the 150th anniversary of the day when 8 women met on a dark and stormy night in Boston to organize for mission focused on the needs of women and children. 150 years later, the total program of United Methodist Women is still mission. Service, advocacy, and learning opportunities equip members to continue that work today. The Legacy Fund, a permanent endowment fund, will help to strengthen and pass on this mission focus to future United Methodist Women members. Anyone is welcome to make a gift to the Legacy Fund, and more information is available on the UMW table in the display room or at unitedmethodist.org.
In the 21st century, women still need to organize for mission. In the past year, Eastern Pennsylvania Conference United Methodist Women not only met, but exceeded a pledge to mission of $150,000. Applause, applause. The 800,000 members, and let me say that again, 800,000 members of United Methodist Women know intuitively there is no mission without dollars. Our pledges support 98 national mission institutions in the United States and mission and ministries all over the world.
Permanent Trust Fund and Investment Committee and Ingathering, two programs unique to Eastern Pennsylvania Conference, provided dollars and items needed right here in our conference.
If you have active United Methodist Women, we don't have to tell you the wonderful mission and outreach work the unit is doing in your church and community. If your church does not have a unit, you're missing out on the enthusiasm and contribution of women dedicated to putting faith, hope, and love into action for women, children, and youth.
In the last year, 4 articles highlighting ministry in Eastern Pennsylvania Conference were printed in Response Magazine, the magazine of women in mission produced by United Methodist Women. The social activism of New Vision on North Broad Street in Philadelphia and the camping ministry of Midtown Parish are supported by grants from the Permanent Trust Funds and Investment Committee of Eastern Pennsylvania Conference United Methodist Women. Articles by Kathy Parks of Salem United Methodist Women in Allentown and Connie Curtis of Ben Salem United Methodist Women reported the ministries of their units. We applaud the national recognition that Eastern Pennsylvania Conference, UMW, has received.
Our purpose calls us to expand our concepts of mission. We not only meet immediate needs, but we work on long-term social justice issues. Some UNW members attended ecumenical advocacy days in Washington, D.C., where we lobbied the United States senators and representatives from our different states on issues of militarism, racism, and materialism. Our Charter for Racial Justice Committee is very active and engaged in implementing the Charter for Racial Justice.
One last thing. Brochures for Mission U are available at the UMW table in the display area. Mission U will be held at the Inn at Reading, July 21st to the 22nd. The registration deadline is June 20th, which is next Tuesday, so you still have time to register. Courses available are Covenantal Community, Climate Justice, and the Missionary Conferences of the United Methodist Church. CEUs are available for clergy, and Mission U courses can also count as Christ Servant Minister and Certified Lay Minister credits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. I hope you have better luck at the Inn at Reading with the false fire alarms than we did. So, good luck. Since we're ahead of schedule, Clifton Hubbard, the president of the United Methodist Men for the conference, is not in the room. So I'm going to turn this back over to the bishop.
We have a tradition in this conference of doing things twice. Do you remember that voting machine? Well, we're going to try the historical questions again because there's a few people that weren't here because of the time change, and we probably should never tell time. We should just say, show up at lunchtime and you'll be right on time. But this is such a precious moment. I know the body will be glad to indulge me in one more time with the historic questions, and just ask you to keep them in your heart as you hear them a second time, and think how you can support these future pastors and current pastors in keeping these promises they're making not only to the church but to God. So once again, will the commissionees and the ordinands please come forward for the historic questions. This is a far better congregation. Friends, you have indicated that you are convinced that you should enter the ordained ministry of Christ's holy church. You have declared that you are willing to face any sacrifice that may be involved in the consecration of life. You have indicated that you are so situated in life that you can accept the obligations of itinerant ministry. Remember the words of Christ who said, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." Therefore, in accordance to the discipline of the United Methodist Church and the historic usages of our communion, and in the presence of this conference, I ask you again, have you faith in Christ? Yes. Are you going on to perfection? Yes. Do you expect to be made perfect in love in this life? Yes. Are you earnestly striving for it? Yes. Are you resolved to devote yourself wholly to God and God's work? Yes. Do you know the general rules of our church? Yes. Will you keep them? Have you studied the doctrines of the United Methodist Church? Yes. After full examination, do you believe that our doctrines are in harmony with the Holy Scriptures? Yes. Will you preach and maintain them? Yes. Have you studied our form of church discipline and polity? Yes. Do you approve of our church government and polity? Yes. Will you support and maintain them? Will you diligently instruct the children in every place? Yes. Will you visit from house to house? Yes. Will you recommend fasting or abstinence, both by precept and example? Yes. Are you determined to employ all of your time to the work of God? Yes. Are you in debt so as to embarrass you in your work? No. Will you observe the following directions? Be diligent. Never be unemployed. Never be triflingly employed. Never trifle away time, neither spend any more time at any one place than is strictly necessary. Be punctual. Do everything exactly at the time. And do not mend our rules, but keep them, not for wrath, but for conscience sake. Brothers and sisters, once again, and for the first time for some, here's our class of ordinands and commissionees. Let's greet them. You may be seated. I think we'll take a 15-minute break to make sure we catch all the other people that don't think this thing starts till 3 o'clock, and we'll see you back then.